All right, so I changed my mind. I am going to make a video of the water cycle and the carbon cycle. I'm going to start with the water cycle. We start off with clouds and condensation forms in the clouds, and we end up with precipitation. Precipitation could be rain or snow or sleet or hail. And the water falls onto the lakes and oceans and also onto the ground, into the soil and into certainly reservoirs. Now, the water evaporates from lakes and oceans and certainly would do so faster on a hot, dry day. It also evaporates from the ground. Certainly if if there's water on the roads, it would evaporate from the roads and it would evaporate from the soil. So, right after rain, the soil is, definitely soggier than it would be after a few days of dry weather. But it goes from the ground up into the roots, stems, and leaves of the plant, transported through the xylem. And then water vapor evaporates from the stomata and the underside of the leaves, and that is called transpiration. Now, when water molecules evaporate, they pull other water molecules with them because of their polar nature. The hydrogen of one water molecule is attracted to the oxygen of another. So when a water molecule evaporates, it actually pulls the other water molecules up against gravity. And that is how water can travel up to the tops and the leaves in a very tall tree. Now, the water then goes from plants to animals. Animals get their water from reservoirs or the groundwater. I've never actually been ever caught drinking out of a puddle, but your dog probably has. You also get quite a bit of moisture from your food. If you have a salad or eat a piece of fruit, there's a lot of moisture. Even if you eat meat, there's water in that, unless you're eating beef jerky. So then once animals and plants die, decomposers break them down. And plants, animals, and decomposers, and in fact all living things, respire all the time. And one of the waste products of cellular respiration is water. It's formed during the electron transport system when oxygen picks up those extra electrons and hydrogens. Now, that's certainly not going to produce nearly as much water as evaporation is. So this section of the water cycle in this diagram is certainly not going to be putting as much water back into the atmosphere as evaporation would. Now we're moving on to the carbon cycle, and we start off with carbon dioxide in the air, and we end up with carbon fixation into plants, and we know that process is photosynthesis. And we know that the Calvin cycle takes in carbon dioxide to make glucose. And remember that plants are not the only photosynthetic organisms. Certainly algae and cyanobacteria would also be photosynthetic and producing sugar. Once those carbohydrates are produced by plants, animals eat those plants. And then animals break down that sugar in the process called cellular respiration. And one of the byproducts of cellular respiration is carbon dioxide. But remember, animals are not the only organisms that respire. Plants respire. And so do decomposers. Now, we know that decomposers break down organic compounds into inorganic compounds. And in this case, with carbon dioxide and glucose is organic and carbon dioxide is inorganic. All organisms can break down carbohydrates from organic to inorganic compounds. Now, if you have anaerobic decay going on for hundreds of millions of years, you can end up with fossil fuels. Now, the reason that they're important in the carbon cycle is because when we get those fossil fuels and burn them, we add carbon dioxide into the air, which then traps heat, and this is the cause of global warming. Carbon dioxide is not the only greenhouse gas, but it is one of the most abundant greenhouse gases and one of the most important. Now, if you're in an area that does not necessarily have access to fossil fuels, maybe if you're in a developing nation, rather than using fossil fuels for energy, you might burn wood directly. And that would certainly also put CO2 back into the air. And of course, anytime you cut down a tree for its wood, you're also removing a plant that could photosynthesize and remove CO2 from the air. Of course, that probably is not nearly as damaging to the environment as the amount of fossil fuels that we burn.